what people become Prime Minister of St. Lucia have been the most readied. If I'm convinced that any of my ministers is doing anything that is injurious to St. Lucia by word or deed, I will call them up. If I believe that any of my ministers is doing, I'll say it again, injurious to the people of the country, I will pull them up. Because my experience, my ministerial experience, based on ministerial experience, I've been the most ready. If there have been any instances where the country's resources have been, to use a wrong word, stolen, justice must be done. Must be done. And justice should be done if there are any signs that the country's money was not used properly. And I'm telling you that I come to judgment when I have all the facts. And I'm saying to you that in this matter, the action I've taken is the minister has been asked to be on leave. And I've given his portfolios to other people, so the business of government continues. So the Ministry of Housing will not suffer, the Ministry of Local Governments, the people will not suffer because of the absence of the minister. And that is nothing new. Anytime the Prime Minister, if the correlation, the people of this country, because it's not about the minister or about me, it's about the people of the country. The people of the country will not suffer because the minister is on leave. There is a minister in local government and there's a minister in housing. So the people's business continues. I am awaiting the end or the conclusion of the police investigation. This is the first order of business. When I get the police investigation, what will happen will have to happen. But I'm not rushing to judgment because there's a police investigation. There's a police investigation. And I'm not interfering in the police investigation. I'm not a prime minister who tells the police what to do as far as investigations are concerned. You may tell me, and I know that is the half-truth that is being peddled. In the case of the Senate, I took action. If you go on the record, you will see that I said, when the senator gets charged, C-H-A-R-G-E-D, I hope I spent it properly. I hope I spent it properly. That's what I said. When he is charged, so the hypocrites that talk about Sandy Felix and to action against him, when he's charged, that's what I said. The day he was arrested, I said nothing. Remember that? Let the history prove it. Let the history prove it. The day I said nothing when he was charged, as usual. Huh?
You said charged. You said nothing when he was arrested.
When he was arrested, sorry, yes. I never arrested. The history will show that. I said nothing when he said nothing. I said nothing. Go to the history. All those people that think they know history. You know who knows the history? Well, Rick Wayne. Ask him. I said when he was charged out of action. As soon as he was charged, I dismissed him. That's what I said. In terms of this event, in terms of that event, because it was not, it was more than it wasn't a minor situation. A minor situation. Two different situations. Right now, this one has been turned into a major situation. So, I will allow the police investigation to continue. What people become Prime Minister of St. Lucia have been the most readied. If I'm convinced that any of my ministers is doing anything that is injurious to St. Lucia by word or deed, I will call them up. If I believe that any of my ministers is doing, I'll say it again, injurious to the people of the country, I will pull them up. Because my experience, my ministerial experience, based on ministerial experience, I've been the most ready. If there have been any instances where the country's resources have been, to use a wrong word, stolen, justice must be done. Must be done. And justice should be done if there are any signs that the country's money was not used properly. I, Philip Joseph here, I would like to be judged as being the Prime Minister, not being judged as being part of a government.
We came into government that we had a manifesto and a vision and mission that had been approved by my party, by the highest body.
Basel 11 has not been in existence. 50 was...
Giant getting bazooka. You spraying big on to knock out mosquitoes?
I have never had a joint account with anybody in my life. Not my ex-wife, not my children, nobody. And I will refer that to the privileges committee.
What about the culture of people getting into office and not being effective?
What people become Prime Minister of St. Lucia have been the most ready.
Let's do it this Wednesday, because if it's Wednesday, it's NewsMaker Live.
Hello everyone, welcome to NewsMaker Live on DBS Television. My name is Poleon. We continue to focus on an unresolved matter involving the St. Lucia Social Development Fund. And of course, I have a special guest in studio. We'll be taking your calls so that you can be part of the conversation. And that you will also be commenting via our chat room on Facebook. We conclude as always with the clip that peaked. My guest this evening, former Social Transformation Minister, is also the current PRO of the opposition United Workers' Party and a former MP for Rosalie, Mr. Lenard Spider Montoute.
And viewers, rather, and it's a pleasure to be here. I've not been here for a while.
Yes,
yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Why do you think we lack the culture of accountability in St. Lucia? Governments readily accounting to the people, because you have this system in place whereby government institutions ought to be edited.
Well, I mean,
one after
politicians will do what they are allowed to do. And so if people, and not just politicians, people will pursue whatever they can get away with. And I think politicians feel that they can, continue to push the envelope, that they have gotten away with so much and they'll do more all the time. And that is why it is important that as a people, as citizens of a country, we take a stand, we speak out, and we hold our leaders accountable. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, if the leaders believe that it is a free for all, then they will, simply take advantage of it. And so the leaders you have are in a sense a reflection of the people who put them there, who elected them. And so that is why I'm calling on all St. Lucians, like former Prime Minister Dr. Van Luis said, all St. Lucians of goodwill, citizens who care about the future and well-being of the country, that they should take a stand when it is obvious that there is injustice, when it is obvious that there are misdeeds, when it is obvious that there is abuse of power and there is poor governance.
It's easy for you to say that, but I think it's the supporters of the respective political parties, the tendency to be loud and vociferous and very active when they are attacking the opposing government. And maybe that is what is happening right now. Simply put, supporters of the United Party now are very loud and vociferous in condemning what has apparently occurred, what is alleged to have occurred involving SSDF funds. But you don't find that supporters of the SLP, who are supporters of the government, would also join in addressing that particular issue.
Well, it's a natural human tendency to defend, protect, support your own, and to heave condemnation on an opponent. However,
but
the time has come. The time has come.
Of Martinique, that doesn't happen.
No, well, that's why I'm saying the time has come when we have to put national interests ahead of partisan considerations, and we have to be concerned about the future of our country above the fortunes of our party. And I'm not seeing that happening. For example, and it should not only be people who do not support the government speaking out about the ills that they're seeing. If there's blatant abuse of office, if there is, poor governance, if there is corruption, if there's abuse of power, St. Lucian should take a stand to speak out, because in the end it will affect us as a country, not just supporters of one side.
Now, take for example the matter involving Minister Richard Frederick, which is the subject of an investigation.
Exactly.
We're not passing judgment on him, and we're not litigating on that particular matter.
Right.
But can you imagine that supporters of the St. Lucia Labour Party are the ones now who are jumping to his defense? Can you imagine that if he were a government minister on the United Party benches, what would happen?
One thing I can say for the UWP, they condemn their own when they perceive or they know that wrong is done. That's one thing I can say about the United. But the Labour Party supporters should not be so blind and so gullible to the dictates of their leaders, as if Twitter is. And so I am calling on St. Lucians, I didn't say UWPs or SLPs, St. Lucians who care about our future as a country, St. Lucians who care about the way in which this country is run, and St. Lucians who care about the kind of life that we would enjoy in this country, should say something when they see obvious, evident wrongdoing taking place.
But I don't think there are St. Lucians who genuinely care, but they do not speak out, because for them to speak out would be to give the impression that they are supporting the United Workers' Party.
Well, they should not be fearful of this. People can make their judgments, but you should be guided by your conscience. You should be guided by your sense of justice. And so, at the end of the day, St. Lucians who know better, St. Lucians who can, should speak out. Now, I understand that there is a fear factor, and who wants to deny it can, but with the advent of the St. Lucia Labour Party, this is a government that is intimidating. This is a government that is threatening. Anytime you oppose them or speak against them, they come at you, they come after you. They do not uphold the principles of democracy. This is a government that has usurped the media, bought out most of them, used them as mouthpieces for the government, threaten others, abuse others who are not overtly advocating their views. And this is a government that comes after private individuals, threaten them, and with victimization and withholding benefits that is supposed to be that all citizens are supposed to be entitled to. And we have seen ministers of government call out private individuals, abuse private individuals also, and we sit by and say nothing. That is unacceptable. That is not consistent with what should happen in a democracy.
16-1.
Yeah.
Don't you think that is what is serving as an inhibiting factor?
Well, irrespective of the score, and by the way, it's 14
to 1.
14 to 1.
Yeah. But really,
no. Well, you see, you cannot have it both ways. Richard Frederick is not a member of the St. Lucia Labour Party, but tomorrow, 16-1, he is a. No, we can't have it both ways. Make up your mind what it is, and whether it is 16-1 or 17-0. That does not give a government, a political organization that is in office, the authority and the power to run roughshod over people in the country and to abuse the laws of the country and to suppress the citizens of that country. Because laws are there for a reason. Laws are supposed to protect every citizen, even the weak. But when we have people with so much power that they feel they can abuse and misuse the law itself that they are supposed to uphold, we have a problem. When we have a country where people have no confidence in our justice system, and I'm one of them, you have a problem. Because at the end of the day, you feel that if you are not powerful, if you are not well placed, if you are not up in society, then you have no voice. Every citizen ought to have a voice, and every citizen's voice should count.
You made reference to adhering to laws, but what about regulations? When, for example, institutions like the SSDF, they ought to have an audit be conducted into the operations and how the finances are utilized annually. And there's a situation where there's been a dereliction of duty by this current administration, and also the United Workers' Party when it was in office between 2016 and 2021. So clearly, both sides are responsible for the same issue that we are expressing concern over.
I'll quickly take the opportunity to correct you, because you have been misled by your leader, and that is something leaders should not do. Deliberately, and I say deliberately, knowingly mislead people. That is what the Prime Minister did at the press briefing, his last press briefing. Deliberately and knowingly mislead the nation. And that was designed to deflect focus from the real issue, which is the abuse, the allegations of abuse of SSDF funds, which is allegations of a minister in his cabinet committing criminal acts, and the fact that he's been called upon to do something about it. So instead of addressing the issue, he came up with that concocted story, totally fabricated. But the truth really is, I said it on a radio program, which you, by the way, hosted, and I'm going to repeat it. When I became minister responsible for the SSDF in 2016 under UWP administration, the last audit that was done in 2012. We embarked upon a program to bring the audits up to date. It was tedious, it was difficult because the records were not readily available. And like I explained, that is because some of the records were stored in poor conditions and were rendered useless. But we went around that by taking a decision to undertake what they called qualified audits. The qualified audits were done up to 2016. When the Labour Party won the election in 2016, the accountant.
In 2016, the United Workers' Party won in 2016.
Sorry, when the Central Labour Party won in 2021, the records had been brought up to date up to 2016, and they were working on the subsequent years. The accountant continued and got up to 2018, right? Of course, that overlapped into the reign of the SLP. But after the accountant demitted office, when he left, no further audits were done. So in effect, he continued the program that had started under our watch and brought it up to 2018. What the SLP should have done is to continue and bring it up to date and make it current. And they had enough time to have done that in 5 years. They did not do any, just as they did not do between 2012 and 2016.
Okay, because the PJP government claims it had to resort to qualified audits. And again,
the information was twisted.
Supporting documentation.
The information was twisted, Tim, and I've been told by the people who raised me that you shouldn't call people liars. Although I figure if you tell a lie, you're a liar. And you, Tim, have told me that I can call people liar on your program.
Especially if you don't have the evidence.
Especially, but I have the evidence, but I'll still abide by your ruling. But the Prime Minister was blatantly dishonest. He twisted the story. Okay, and instead of admitting his shortcomings, he tried to transfer that to the United Workers' Party. They were the ones who did not do what they were supposed to do, which is annual audits, and we had to end up doing qualified audits as a result of that. That is the fact.
And later, during the course of the broadcast, we'll be hearing from former Prime Minister Mr. Alain Chastanet on this same matter. But now let us hear from Prime Minister Philippe J. addressing reporters during the pre-cabinet press briefing on Monday of this week, when he claimed that the previous United Workers' Party administration did not conduct any audit into the SSDF during its reign of 2016 to 2021.
I just want to clarify something that you've been hearing all over about audits for the St. Lucia Social Development Fund. The leader of the opposition has written several organizations, several embassies, several foreign governments, locally and internationally, including the Caribbean Development Bank, proclaiming that there has been no audits of the St. Lucia Social Development Fund since the Labour Party is in power. I want to tell you, this is a falsity of the highest order. Let me tell you the facts. Let us deal with it in terms of years. You must have got copies of the letter from the leader of the opposition, and he claims that no audits have been done or no reports have been given on the St. Lucia Social Development Fund. You may recall that Alain Chastanet was Prime Minister from the year 20, and I want you to take these dates correctly, take them down, from the year 2016 to 2021. And I want you to correct me if I'm wrong. The last audit, listen carefully, please. 2016 to 2021, the then leader of the opposition was Minister of Finance. The last audit for the St. Lucia Social Development Fund was done for the years 2017 and 2018. These audits were done in March 2023. These audits were done in March 2023. And the St. Lucia Labour Party, we were the party in power at that time. Now, let me tell you further. Upon assuming office, the current board of directors initiated the process of auditing the financial statements of the St. Lucia Social Development Fund, recognizing the importance of ensuring that financial records were necessary. The process initially focused on clearing the outstanding audits for the financial year, for the financial period 2016 to 2021 under the United Workers' Party government. The audit for the financial years 2016 to 2017 and 2017 to 2018 has since been completed under the administration of the current board of directors. As part of its efforts to address the outstanding financial statements, the board encountered challenges in obtaining the necessary supporting documents for the subsequent financial years 2017 to 2018, 2018 to 2019, 2019 to 2020, and 2020 to 2021, all under the governance of the United Workers' Party. No audits were performed, none.
Well, you just heard and saw the Prime Minister in that.
Yeah, and I take strong objection to what was just done there. As the minister who presided over the SSDF at the time, I think, you know, if the Prime Minister wants to deflect and so on. And by the way, you notice how he laughs at us when he's telling his lies? You know, he laughs because he knows exactly what he was about doing. And so he turned it on, took the truth and twisted it and said that there were documents that were missing, and that is why the audits were not done, and that's why they were qualified audits. The documents that were missing were documents between 2012 and 2016. And I explained when I called your program recently that it is because those documents were stored in containers and in poor conditions where they suffered water damage and mold and were rendered useless, you know, and so the SSD have been determined to fulfill its mandate of preparing audits, went ahead anyway and produced qualified audits. The continuation, okay, and I'm saying to do the audits you have to bring it up to date, so you have to start from where, you know, the lag was, and that was from 2012. We had to work on 2012 when we got in 2016. So 2012, 2013, 2013, 2014, 2014, 2015, 2015, 2016 had to be done before you started to do our term. That was started by the time I demitted office. Okay, but as soon as the accountant who was there and part of that program, and remember the board was changed, as soon as he left, that was the end of it. And so it is a lie. Okay, the Prime Minister told a lie when he said that there were no documents or anything like that. Okay, I stand by what I'm about to say, that is a lie. The compromised documents were documents of the term before I became minister. Okay, and there was no problem with the documents. And besides too, a little delay was experienced too, I must say, during COVID. Okay, I mean, audit wasn't the main focus at that time because the SSDF was one of the agencies that was highly challenged during COVID, because we had to engage in all kinds of extra programs to facilitate the sudden need that had arisen, because we had to feed people, we had to, you know, increase the numbers that we had to cater for in all kinds of safety net programs and so on. So they were very much stretched, and so that was not a priority necessarily, and it slowed down the process. So, but it was continued. So by the time they got into office, okay, what had been completed from what had started, they did not continue it. And so for the balance of their tenure, they did no audits. Again, just as they did for the term before. Right? The question is, why do they avoid doing the necessary audits that is required according to the Act of the SSDF, just as they do with the CIP, when they must be called upon and they never produce a CIP report on time? Why is that? Is because there is something untoward being done? Is it because something is being hidden? You know, I can stand by my board, I can stand by the staff, okay, and I can stand as minister responsible to say we did what was required of us, because I had nothing to hide, and I will not ask my staff to suppress information or to withhold information. I will not do it. So I will say to the Prime Minister tonight, he has become very famous for deceit, for dishonesty, for outright lies. And that, I must tell him, is an insult to the citizens of St. Lucia. It's a form of disrespect when people believe they can pull wool over your eye. And in some of the ways he does it, it is so glaringly obvious. It tells me that he does not have respect for St. Lucians, for him to do something like that. Okay, and I'm saying to the Prime Minister, Philip J. Pierre, that you are dishonest, and you should withdraw the comments that you made there, because it is not true.
But it's safe to say that he might be misleading, might have gotten it wrong, instead of saying that dishonest.
He's being dishonest to mislead. He's being dishonest, outright dishonest. Okay? Because just as I know the information, he is the minister responsible for the SSDF. He has access to the information. Okay?
But COVID or not,
yeah.
Mr. Montoute, as a former social transformation minister, don't you think that, as the saying goes, you can walk on sugar at the same time, meaning feed the people?
I didn't say we abandon it, I said that slow down.
Feed the people, do everything that you have to do, but at the same time, there must be the checks and balances to ensure that the finances of the people are well spent.
I'm not making any excuses for not providing them. I'm just saying COVID was an extraordinary period. It slowed down the process. That's all I'm saying. Okay? They came in after COVID. Why didn't they bring the records up to date? I can sit here and tell you now, if I had the opportunity to continue as minister, the records would be current by now. I can sit here and say that to you. Because what I did was ensure that my board do the right thing and correct the negligence, okay, that existed before, in terms of not performing the duties as they should, of doing the records when they should have.
But in establishing the SSDF, legislation would have been enacted, and one of the areas would have been so that you have mandatorily an audit conducted on an annual basis.
Yes, and they violated that.
Going forward, sir, considering that both sides have violated
No, Tim, withdraw that statement.
Yeah.
You have to withdraw that statement. I will not sit here and accept for you to say that, because the Prime Minister told you so. I have told you what the Prime Minister said is a lie, and I'm on television saying that the Prime Minister told a lie when he said what he said.
Okay, but considering...
So I will not accede to that.
I'm saying to you, considering that there have been instances where audits have been pending during the reign of both SLP and United Workers' Party administration, is that fair to say?
I'm speaking from my tenure.
Yeah, generally speaking.
Okay, and I'm not speculating here right now, but I'm being specific. Let's deal with a specific case. We're talking about SSD.
Do you think that going forward, legislation should also include that penalties would be imposed on individuals, for example, the social transformation minister, the whole of the office, etc., those who are presiding over the affairs of those state institutions, so that going forward that we do not have those kind of excuses being made?
Absolutely. I have no difficulties with what you just said, because it appears, for example, and we have a living example before us, what happens on the SLP administration, that they neglect to carry out the dictates of the Act, because they figure there are no consequences. And it's unfortunate that we must have penalties imposed for us to do what we are supposed to do and to follow regulations. But if that is what it will take, that should be done.
But wouldn't an active PAC, Public Accounts Committee, deal with issues of that nature? and unfortunately over the last several years. And the leader of the opposition is the holder of that position very often, right?
Yeah.
9 out of 10 times. Why do you think that our PAC has not been functioning over several decades now?
Well, I don't know. I mean, a lot of the
it's not seen as a glorious job, as a prominent position.
A lot of the functions and the institutions that are set up do not really perform. And so, for example, you have an ombudsman. I wonder if you know who is the ombudsman. Where's the office of the ombudsman? What does the ombudsman do? Does the ombudsman do anything? You know, I mean, but there's a function for the ombudsman. You know, and so we adopt all those institutions and organizations and so on. But at the end of the day, it is important. But you see, again, it is because of our citizenry. I mean, you get what you allow. You understand what I'm saying? You are treated the way you allow yourself to be treated. And so if slackness is entertained and encouraged, slackness will prevail. And that is why it is important that we take a stand on what has happened with the SSDF right now. And when I say what has happened, I'm not saying what is alleged is a fact. But by now, Tim, don't you think we should be in a position to say whether or not it is? You know, it is a very simple matter to establish whether or not the allegations are true. Very, very simple matter.
How simple? Why is that?
There were copies of checks posted publicly. All I have to do is call my executive director, my chairman, my when I say my, assuming I'm minister, my accountant, and say, are these really SSDF checks? The records will tell you yes or no. If these are really SSDF checks, your records ought to say that Timothy Poleon was paid $1,800. The records ought to say for what? Now, the for what comes within a certain parameter. Okay? It cannot be, okay, for Timothy Poleon to go on a cruise. It cannot be. There are certain parameters within which the mandate of the SSDF is there to fulfill certain needs for poor people. So it has to be. They gave him a job because he's unemployed. They assisted him with school educational assistance. They provided him with housing assistance. Those kinds of things. They provided infrastructure in his area because they needed a footpath. These are the things that the funds of the SSDF ought to go to. So it is clear-cut. So if Timothy Poleon took the funds of the SSDF to go and wine and dine his lady, okay, that is a breach of the act. How difficult is it to establish that? Your record's supposed to tell you. And especially these days where you have computerized technological facilities at your disposal. Within 15 minutes, you should, as a minister, I would have known whether or not there's any merit to that allegation within the day. Within the day, because it's sufficiently important and serious that should be established. We cannot get a statement from the executive director who is in a position to tell you whether or not there's any merit to it. And by the way, his signature appears on some of those checks. So there's no mystery in that, you know, Tim. They say, well, if we found $100 there and we don't know who put it there and so on, that requires investigation. What investigation? That's clear-cut, obvious. Okay? The executive director, Mr. John Victorin, okay, ought to be able to clear the air on that in a moment. Within a moment's notice, he ought to be able to call a press conference or call your program or whatever medium he chooses to clear the air on that. He has not said a word on that up to today. Now, what does that say? You know, that is scorn of the highest order. The Prime Minister, who is the minister responsible for the SSDF, okay, ought to pick up his phone. With all that brouhaha going on, every time I call your program, that's what I talk about. Every time I listen to your program, that's what I hear. Okay? On the streets, that's what social media, that's what I see. And up to this day, you have not seen it necessary or fit to uphold your responsibility, the reputation of your country, the image of the agency, okay, to ensure that that matter is clarified, is cleared, And if you find out that there's any veracity to the claims, that you, in emphatic language, tell us exactly in no uncertain terms what it is you're going to do to correct it, given the fact that there's an act to guide the conduct of the officers of the SSDF and to dictate what exactly the funds are supposed to be used for. Do you have any regard for the donors when you neglect to perform? Let me just say something to you. Remember, it's not even Timothy Poleon, it's a minister of government that's been accused of misfeasance. Okay? And that is a criminal act, Tim, for you to take the money of the SSDF and go against the dictates of the act that governs the SSDF. That is a criminal act. Don't you think it's important to establish whether or not that was the case? For the SSDF executive director, Mr. John Victorin, if you signed the check, okay, not establishing that the check was going to go to use for the purposes for which it was intended, that is misfeasance on his part. For the Prime Minister and Minister responsible for the SSDF not to go in and find out exactly what the situation is up to now, these are weeks that the matter is going on, up to now, okay, that is nonfeasance on his part, okay. That is a man who is responsible for our finances in this country. And Tim, to make matters worse, you have a board, a whole board of about 12 people. And they cannot get away with that because they too are guilty of nonfeasance, not performing their duty. And Tim, if you know who are on the board, and there's a deliberate reason why some of those people are placed on that board. Okay, some people, because of their background in finance, accounting, management. Some people, because of the agency they belong to, they represent those agencies. And I want to call the names, because not one, only one of them has spoken so far. And I'm interested in telling you what that one has said. But let me go through the names first. The chairman of the SSDF board, Mr. Francis Springer, has not uttered a word, has not said anything. It is his responsibility, along with his board, to oversee the proper running and management of the SSDF. He has failed in his duty if what the allegations claim are true. You have Mr. John Victorin, the executive director. Okay, he's not a board member, but he sits at board meetings. Okay, he oversees the day-to-day running of the SSDF. He signs checks on behalf of the SSDF, and something like that has happened. He obviously knows what the situation is. While we are asking questions, he has the answers to those questions. He has refused to come out and make a statement. He owes it to the public of St. Lucia, who pay his salary, to make a statement and clear the air on that matter. There is Charmaine Emmanuel from the Ministry of Equity. There is Schaefer Sylvester from the Ministry of Education. There is Dr. Cordelia Ambrose from the Ministry of Local Government, and by the way, a permanent secretary. And I say so to say to you, Tim, that someone like that definitely knows better. A permanent secretary, okay, is the accounting officer for the ministry. So they ought to know how government is run, how governments operate, and how statutory organizations operate. So she knows, and she not ought to, he knows better. Okay. There is, of course, Imran Williams. Can you believe it? If I tell you who Imran Williams is, you may want to question me, and you're free to. Imran Williams is, by the way, the Director of Finance. He's representing the Ministry of Finance on that one. You know who the Director of Finance is, Tim? Okay. The Chief Financial Officer of the government of St. Lucia. This is a man who oversees everything to do with our finances in this country, okay, under the auspices of the Minister of Finance. He, by the way, I was told, is also the chairman of the fund that the CIP money goes into. I'll give you the name of it in a while. He is
National Academic Fund?
National Academic Fund, thank you, Tim. He is also the deputy chairman of this organization. Okay? Now, I want to stop for a moment on Mr. Imran Williams for a particular reason. This is egregious that a man like him would sit on an organization like this, knowing the reason why this thing was set up. It was set up in 2009 under my watch, okay, when the PRF, Poverty Reduction Fund, and the Basic Need Trust Fund, BNTF, were merged, okay, and I will give you the reasons later if we have the time why that was done. It was, I mean, a recommendation that had been made and not been carried out, but I ensured that it was done. But Mr. England Williams is apparently in an incestuous kind of operation, okay, because he ought to ensure that all government finances are properly accounted for, properly managed, and so on. But he's sitting on a board where an allegation like this is being made, and you're comfortable sitting there, and you have not said a word, you have not done a thing. Then you have Ainsworth Shalmine of the Ministry of Infrastructure, because SSDF engages in infrastructural work, paths and so on, even roads. You have Miss Catherine Seelys, who's representing NGOs. And in case you, Tim, as a media worker, have forgotten who Catherine Seelys is, I want to remind you. This is an advocate for women, vulnerable women. This is a person who has called on me as Minister of Social Transformation, and you have to make a statement, you have to say something, unless a spider Montoute has to say something and so on. Today, it is my turn to call on Catherine Seelys and say, Madam, as an advocate for vulnerable women, and most poor people in this, of our poor people in St. Lucia, and when I say women, don't forget they are responsible for the children most of the time when the fathers are absent, okay? The SSDF deal with a lot of those people. That money is meant for them, okay? And while you're advocating for vulnerable people, you might want to take a moment to raise your voice on behalf of those vulnerable women that you claim to represent, to say something about this egregious allegation, that atrocity. If it is true, you should know by now, you should care to find out if it is true or not. But in all fairness to her, Tim, she has been the only one to have responded so far, the only one to make a public statement so far. And I want to read to you the statements she has made on social media thus far. Catherine Seelys, the advocate for vulnerable women, from Raise Your Voice. Okay? Catherine Seelys says, awaiting UWP response to we want an audit. Shake my head. You will need smelling salt just now. In other words, you're not about to get any response about any audit. That's the scorn, the disdain, the disrespect Catherine Seelys has for St. Lucians, okay, and the people she claimed to represent, vulnerable women. She also posted, UWP, you do not have equipment to bring down any government, deban volle. Okay, so it's a political thing for her. It is a political thing for her. So she's going to make abusive remarks, call names and so on, you know, instead of addressing the issue. I called your program, your radio program, News Spin, the famous News Spin, the most monitored program, and I said that I expected by now that she would have made a statement. I mentioned her name. I called on her to raise her voice. You know what her response was? I heard Lenard Montoute was calling my name on radio show. Spider, it is not my business when women decide to sleep with man for money or try to use pum pum as bait. Catherine Seelys' response. A woman who cares about vulnerable men, represent vulnerable men. Tim, I do expect that from you. I do expect that more so from someone who says she is a representative and an advocate for vulnerable women. Because there are varying angles which you could take. It is interesting that that is the angle she took. She didn't think that, and I'm not familiar with the cases about pum pum for money and all of that. I'm not, but you may want to look at it from different angles. Why does a woman have to give pum pum for money?
But let's leave some room for Miss Catherine Seeley at some point in time to address that particular issue.
Oh, you still waiting? You still
no, I'm just saying.
You need to smell and salt. She talk about
whether she will tell us for sure that she was the one who actually made that statement on her Facebook page. Because I'm just saying we have to be fair.
Okay, fair enough. So I will join you
and objective on this particular issue.
Fair enough. And I'll be relieved for you, Madam Catherine Seeley, to come out and say that you did not make those statements. And I still find it hard to believe that she did. Okay? Because if you did, that is déclassé, that is low, and that is totally a betrayal of who you say you are as an advocate for women. And you do not deserve to be considered or call yourself an advocate for women if you actually made those statements. So, I granted. Okay? So much for the only one that has responded so far, if that is the person who actually responded. Then we have Lucius Elovic. From what I gather, my research tells me this is a man of great stature, especially in the community of Labrie in the south. A man well known. His name is synonymous with credit unions. Credit union is a financial institution, so he knows a thing or two about the management of finance. He has not said a word. I'm hoping that he's not comfortable with what has gone on, and that he does not care, that he does not think it's sufficiently serious for him to speak up. Lucilla Curtin, women's group, has not said a word. Another person who is representing women has not said a word. And mind you, the checks that have surfaced, it is claimed that those checks were given to women, okay, who were exploited. If what is true, what is said is true, they were exploited for the receipt of those checks. Ezra Small, National Youth Council now, the young people. Okay, we always say the youth, we need a seat at the table, the youth, are the leaders of tomorrow and whatever. Well, I'm hoping we're not asking for a seat at the table for the youth just to be present. The youth must acquit themselves well when they're given the opportunity and show that they deserve the seat that they have and that they are in fact leaders in their own right themselves. And young people would have been deprived of funds that were meant for them, to assist them, okay, to alleviate their vulnerability, if those funds were misdirected and used for our minister's personal use.
But we have to stress.
Lastly,
but we have to, before you continue, we have to stress that no government. I agree. But no government minister has admitted to any wrongdoing as far as this whole SSDF issue is concerned.
That is as bad as the allegations that we are hearing. The fact that up to now, no government minister has come out to clear it, including the Prime Minister who was Minister for SSDF. That, I think, is egregious. And you see, we cannot accept or tolerate these things, Tim, as a country. It doesn't matter which side you're on. It doesn't matter where you stand on the political divide. We cannot condone or accept those things. We are destroying our institutions. We are destroying our democracy. We are destroying our reputation. We are bringing our country and our institutions into disrepute by things like that. A scandal like that cannot be allowed to fester for weeks. I just told you, Tim, that's one of the easiest allegations I've heard, to squash, to just put to rest. Easiest to establish whether or not it is true. If it is true, immediately tell us what actions you're going to take, because they are standard, best practices, recommended actions that are taken in cases like this. I mean, the world over is replete with examples, The Prime Minister knows what to do, because in other cases he has recommended what should be done. But in this case here, now let me just say something. Let me call the last name first. That person should not escape either. Nisha St. Catherine of the Ministry of Health. You all, the 12 of you, have a responsibility to St. Lucia and St. Lucians, okay, to say something. Because if what has happened is true, it represents nonfeasance on your part. And the fact that you are not taking a stance and saying anything, it is even more egregious. Okay, you are facilitating the breach of the St. Lucia Social Development Fund Act if you allow something like that to happen. Okay, and we would hate to know that all of those esteemed people, that is what they were brought there to do, And that is what they are doing. Okay?
The fact that there's this silence on the part of people against whom allegations are made, and also as you just mentioned, the board of the SSDF and the management of the fund as well, they've remained quiet on it. Doesn't that say something about the opposition itself? That there's no fear that the opposition I'm just saying sufficiently
the opposition takes blame for
sufficiently powerful, because that's what you are. You are basically the government in waiting to create certain safeguards to represent the interests of the people. You have a lone voice in Parliament, but that's where decisions are made and decisions are taken.
Let me answer you with a question, Tim. Isn't that an embarrassment and an indictment on your profession? The media, okay, who have a big stake in a democracy and have a major responsibility to uphold in a democracy. The media, isn't that an indictment on y'all? The sole member of the opposition that is in Parliament has done far more than y'all have done. Okay? And I say y'all, I know you're not into things, but I lump y'all because when you all talk about politicians, violence on y'all's point at me too. So I mean, we're making a generalization here right now. The leader of the opposition has done far more than the opposition has done. He has spoken out on it. I've not heard, apart from you, any media worker speak out on it. None.
But we are not elected by the people.
No. But you have a responsibility to the people.
The opposition and your voice was elected by the people.
And the opposition has lived up to its responsibility. It is the same opposition that you all are allowing condemnation to be heaped upon for writing to agencies, external agencies, to do something about what our people who have the responsibility to oversee those institutions are not doing anything about. Okay? Alan Chasney, I can tell you, if there's one thing without reservation I can say I'm proud of him for, is the fact that he has taken a stance on that matter. And you know what he has called for? Nothing partisan, nothing political, nothing out of the way, nothing unpatriotic. He has called for an independent audit to be done. He has called for a commission of inquiry to be set up for the investigation, and that commission be involved in setting up the audit, the auditing team to look into the matter. He even went as far as to suggest that maybe an institution, a reputable institution like the Caribbean Development Bank, be asked to look into it, because they are donors and they have an interest in what's going on there. I think he has played his role. What is left to be done now is we, the citizens of St. Lucia, to stand strong behind him, not for political reasons, but for national interests, to ensure that something is done and what he's calling for, that it is done. And I want to ensure too that in calling for the auditing to be done, I heard the Prime Minister say that an audit is being done. No internal audit can be done. The same Imran Williams, who would normally, see about the finances of the country, he may be very well a subject of the investigation that is going on there. He cannot be part of it. Not just Imran, but all the board members and the executive director may very well be subjects of the investigation that will take place. They cannot be involved in setting up the auditing team. They cannot be involved in influencing the investigation in any manner. Again, it is important that that the public get the perception that justice is being served, okay, and that there's no prejudice, no undue influence, or any conflict is present in this matter, so that the matter can be brought to rest and we can be satisfied that the truth was established and revealed.
Any fears that this whole process has been contaminated in the eyes of the public? Because we're mainly hearing from politicians from both sides.
You know why?
You have the opposition attacking, and then you have the government side defending.
Well, the opposition is not attacking. I'm not attacking. I am pleading. Okay? I didn't hear Alan Chasney, as the leader of the opposition, is not attacking. He is recommending. He made some recommendations. Now, you may hear me read recommendations, and you'll tell me I just repeated what Chasney said. So I'm saying he made the recommendations, okay, which I support. I am pleading. He is recommending. What is the media doing? What are the rest of us doing? All the prominent people in society who have benefited tremendously from this country, okay, What are they saying? What is the Christian Council saying? What is the Bar Association saying? Okay, what are people like Mikey Pilgrim, who have in the past come out and endorsed the SLP, saying? Credit to him, in the last election he came out and he made a statement about the minister in question. I give him credit for that. The time has come once again, former Prime Minister, that you let us know, and by the way, when you consider his background, okay, in accounting and all of that, I would be interested to hear what he has to say today on the matter. The Comptons, okay, prominent family in St. Lucia, who usually have a voice at election time, they have endorsed the St. Lucia Labour Party in the past, and so on. I am curious and interested in hearing what they have to say today on this matter. Okay? Come out and say something. Dr. Kenny Anthony, a statesman, an elderly statesman, a leader, a former leader. If John Compton was there, I would call on him as well. Sir John, sorry. Dr. Anthony, what do you have to say about this? Are you comfortable with this? Are you happy with this? Are you satisfied with this? You know, what do you have to say? Those people owe it to this country, and there are many others. People like Peterkin, Richard Peterkin, came out and endorsed the Prime Minister, the current Prime Minister, Philip J. Pierre. Okay? Does he still have your endorsement as a man in the field that you are in? Or do you still endorse him after that, what we are seeing there right now, a man who is not living up to his responsibility, trying to dance around the issue, dodge, you know, the reality that is before him, and not taking a stance? Do you still endorse him? I want to hear from them. I want to hear from them. These are influencers. Tim, I cannot point fingers at you. I'm hearing from you. What about your colleagues? What are they saying? You all are influencers of opinions. You all are shapers and formers of opinions in this country. What are you saying? The media, I'm talking to you. What are you saying? What is your position? What are you doing? Are you living up to your responsibility to your country? You know, that is where it is. And so, isn't it a shame for you to say to me that it is only the opposition that is speaking? Why is it only the opposition that is speaking? It should not only be the opposition that is speaking. And I want you to know, when you speak, you're not speaking for the opposition. You're not speaking in support of the opposition. You're speaking for your country. You're speaking in support of your country, in defense of the good name and future of your country. Okay.
We'll hear now from the former Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Mr. Alan Chasney. He called into the lunchtime radio program Newspin earlier today and still focused on the whole SSDF situation.
What the Prime Minister was attempting to do, which I think was to distract all of us, is backfired, and he's actually made a very difficult situation or uncomfortable situation worse. And by that I mean, Tim, the Prime Minister is on record complaining about me copying persons outside of St. Lucia on the letter that I wrote. Now remember, that was my fourth attempt in trying to get a response from the Director of Finance. And the Director of Finance is critical because, as the Director of Finance, he is responsible for the financial system, the accounts of St. Lucia in its totality. He also is the chairman of the Economic Fund. And the way that the Economic Fund works, Tim, it was a special purpose vehicle that was set up to hold the monies that we earned from CIP, because the CIP board, when it receives the money, it cannot spend the money on the development items of St. Lucia. So the money either has to be sent to the consolidated account, and once it's in the consolidated account, there's a proper accounting of the money, or it can be sent to the Economic Fund, and he is the chairman of the Economic Fund. And then we also found out that he was the vice chair of the SSDF. So the Director of Finance is in the line of fire. And I have written to him now on 4 occasions, and not once, Tim, has he even acknowledged the receipt of my letter. In fairness to the Prime Minister, on 2 of my letters, the Prime Minister responded. And I reminded the Prime Minister, while I appreciated him responding, the person that is responsible and accountable to the public is the Director of Finance. Now, what the Prime Minister did when he responded the way that he did, i.e., by now exposing the fact between his presentation or his revelations and Spider's revelations, is that there's been a period of time that the SSDF has not been producing its accounts. And I think that what the Prime Minister did yesterday is making even a stronger case that we don't need just an audit, an ordinary audit of SSDF. What we need is an independent commission of inquiry. And so the letter that I wrote acknowledged that I had heard that an audit had started at SSDF. So I think the Prime Minister is lying, Tim, because I think that it's the pressure that has come about and the revelations about the sex for checks that forced the SSDF now to look into doing an audit, and they've now appointed an auditor. And the question becomes, who selected the auditor? Who determined the terms of reference? Because the allegations that are being made would not allow the board, the director, or the minister, in this case, the Prime Minister, to be involved in that. And an ordinary audit, financial audit, is not sufficient to capture the kind of mismanagement and maladministration that appears to be taking place at the SSDF. And this is a very serious issue. And if you remember, Tim, the first letter that I wrote was after the budget, where the Prime Minister had revealed that some $110 million had been put in for infrastructure and for social development. And I had written to him to get confirmation as to where did that money go. Was that money spent directly by CIP, which is illegal? Was the money sent into the economic fund? And therefore, is there a paper trail where the SSDF made a request for monies and that there was a specific program that was approved by the economic fund for the use of SSDF? Or where is the money? And what's the account? What was the money used for? Because, I mean, I think any fair-minded person, and I'd like to include you in that, Tim, would have to say, if you spent $110 million in SSDF in less than 1 year, and that there was no public announcement as to a major stimulus, a program, who qualified, where did the money go, or any accounting of the money, that's extraordinary. And it only makes the matters worse now that revelations have come to pass that a minister had access to checks, whether they were blank checks, blank signed checks, whether they were checks that were written by the SSDF and then given to the minister to deliver to the individuals. Either one is not ordinary, raises serious questions as to how these monies were being used. So I think the Prime Minister did himself and the country a disservice. Now, the Prime Minister is on record, as I said, complaining about me alerting international authorities. But I would like to remind the Prime Minister that we've reached a new age in our lives, where a press conference that he holds every Monday and reporters are reporting what is coming out of it, makes it internationally. So what he has revealed to the CDB, what he's revealed to the Europeans and to the Canadians and to the Americans, is that SSDF has a serious administrative problem, including maladministration and potential mismanagement of monies. And this has been going on for years. And I think that he has certainly done a lot to undermine the reputation of the SSDF, and an institution that's so important to the more vulnerable people of our society. He's put it in further jeopardy in my mind, Tim.
So it's the case, Mr. Chasney, of governments of St. Lucia, whether it's UWP or the SLP, not taking the responsibility seriously as far as accounting for how they have utilized the resources that are at their disposal, and that is adhering to the annual audits into institutions like the SSDF, because it was pending during your tenure as Prime Minister, new administration, and also pending during the reign of the SLP as well. What say you to this?
Well, I certainly made it a point to try to get all our audits done. I mean, I heard you yesterday, and you're 100% correct. The person tried to bring CIP in. We were up to date on our audits in CIP. We were up to date on our audits with the Tourism Authority. And we were, and if a Spider accounted for it in terms of what he was doing with the audits for SSDF. I'm certainly going to be bringing a motion to the House in an attempt to tighten up on the legality of this. I don't think that any statutory agency that is receiving state funds or international funds ought to be able to conduct them business as usual if they're not producing the audited reports. But I also want to say, Tim, I think it's time for us to accept that financial audits by themselves is insufficient. Now, this is why one of the requirements is for the Auditor General. But in fairness, the Auditor General's office is not staffed sufficiently to be able to conduct the number or staying in touch with the number of audits that ought to be taking place. And I think that this system needs revision. You know, we're still a young country, Tim. We have a lot to learn, but we have a lot to do. I think that we're still learning, and I'm hoping that you would agree with me on this, about accountability and the importance it has in democracy. And if we don't insist that our institutions are functioning properly and are being held properly accounted for, accountable to the people, then we have a problem. But we all need to be able to insist upon it. You know, banks and other institutions that are doing business with those institutions ought to make sure, as a matter of course, that their house is in order.
Part of the interview I conducted earlier today on the Newspin with former St. Lucia Prime Minister, Mr. Alan Chasney. Let's put a telephone number on screen so that you can call right now with your questions and comments for my guest, former Social Transformation Minister, Mr. Lenard Spider Montoute, who is also the former MP for Grosley and currently the Public Relations Officer of the Opposition United Workers' Party. We hope we could have a civilized conversation, and a respectful one at that. And let us just speak as intelligently as we possibly can on this particular subject matter without hurling any unfounded allegations and insults as well. Good evening to you. This is Newsmaker Live. You're on the air.
Hi, good evening.
Hi, good evening to you, caller.
Mr. Montoute. Mr. Montoute. You hear me, Mr. Montoute?
I'm hearing you, yes, I'm hearing you. Go ahead.
Yes. Was the Prime Minister incorrect? I have two questions for you. Was the Prime Minister incorrect when he said that 2 audits were done sometime in March of 2023 of the SSDF from 2016 to 2017, 2017 meeting? Was he incorrect?
No, he wasn't, but those audits were not done at the instance of the new board. It was done at the instance of the...
Can you hold on? Can you just hold on, please?
You don't know how to answer your question. Could you just be quiet and let me answer your question? I was quiet and listened to you. Okay, I was saying that they were done at the instance of the previous board who had started bringing the audits up to date. And so that is the point where they got it overlapped. I said so into the administration of the SLP. But as soon as the accountant who was working with the previous board to bring the audits up to date left, that was the end of it. Just like there was a lapse between 2012 and 2016, there was again another lapse between 2018 and 2025.
That is very disingenuous. However, let me ask you a question again.
What is disingenuous? Hold on. What is disingenuous? Hold on. What is disingenuous?
Because
you can just say that and move on.
No, listen. You asked me a question, let me answer you. You said that there were lapses, right? In 2011, 2016, right?
No, I didn't say that. No, I did not say that. I said the last one that was done in 2012.
In 2012? Okay, granted. Now, next question. Whatever goes
No,
on,
you were telling me what is disingenuous about what I said.
yeah, you try to make as if like you're paid to make an excuse for a reason.
What is the excuse for what reason? I have no excuses to make. I'm stating facts.
Okay,
Facts
so
that are verifiable, by the way.
If you're asking that the government, because the accusation is the government never called did an audit on SSDF.
Did I say what? I didn't quite hear you.
It was being accused. The government has been accused of not doing an audit from of the SSDF for the time they have been into office. And that is disingenuous that it was done. Whether that a BS of old board or new board.
Okay, hold on a moment. If it was done, how come we do not have an audit for the last 5 years?
But you don't understand. If you have to complete an audit, Mr. Spider, if you know how auditors work, if you have from 2016 to 2017 and 2017 to 18, and from 2018 down to 2021, there is no documentation to support anything that was done.
I explained to you that the audit up to 2018 was done at the instant of the previous board. So when the Prime Minister said that the current board, okay, was responsible for doing audits that we didn't do, that was a blatant lie. That is all I'm saying to you.
But 2016, 2017, 2018 was done in March of 2023. It was done by the incoming board that was there.
It was handed over. It was probably handed over in 2023, but it started before that, and it overlapped into that period. And it was at the instant. Do you understand what I mean when I say it was at the instant of the previous board? Do you understand what I mean by that?
No, I don't understand because the
okay. It was initiated by them. It was part of a program that they had begun, and the accountant continued that program even after they had demitted office. But it was not continued after the accountant left. The new board had the opportunity and the option to continue it, but they did not. That is all I'm saying.
Let's move on, caller. What's the other point?
The other point, Mr. Spider, you called Newspin sometime yesterday or the day before.
Yes,
and you made mention that an accusation was being made about you, that you took $750,000 from the SSDF. And you said, no, that's not true. It's $200,000. Is there any documentation for what purpose was that money used?
Okay, so first of all,
thank you.
First of all, I don't think anybody said I took any money from the SSDF. It was said that $700,000 was spent, okay, towards the end of my tenure. And I said that is not the case. It was, I think it was over $200,000, but certainly not the $700,000. That is what I said.
All right, we thank you so much for calling, sir. Let's see if we have some more calls. Once again, for my guest, Mr. Lenard Spider Montoute. Okay, we lost a call.
I was thinking what he thinks about the current situation. Because
disingenuous. I think our Prime Minister has been disingenuous because he tried to play semantics with the facts. The fact of the matter is, from 2011, when the SLP regime was in power, they did not audit. They didn't audit. So they would have, when the United Workers' Party administration took office in 2016, they found no audit from 2012. They rectified that. And tried to explain why it was so tedious to do so, because we would all remember that period of time when the SLP administration of the day took the SSDF from a central location and brought it to a place where the very people that are supposed to be benefiting from SSDF, who are supposed to be visiting SSDF for assistance, could not even access. We remember the steep steps that they placed along the Millennium Highway to access that office. So, you know, if the previous caller does not understand the word, he needs not to use it. Use layman terms so that people can understand you. And if you do not understand the terms, for instance, at the instance of the previous board, if you do not understand that term, kindly ask the good sir to explain it so that you can understand. Because if you do not understand, it stands to reason that the other laborites out there who cannot understand the King's English. Thank you so much for your hearing.
Thank you so much for calling, and we do apologize. I think we are off for a while. People are not getting sound via Facebook. Here's hoping the problem has been rectified.
Yeah, thank you, caller. I mean, you did a far better job in explaining than I did, so I'm hoping that our listeners and viewers, have a better understanding now.
Let's see if we have some more of your calls once again for my guest, Mr. Lenard Spider Montoute. Okay, we lost that call.
Tim, and that's the thing about it, when people, just are so liberal with the truth, the dishonesty that comes out all the time. And the Prime Minister has become famous for being dishonest.
We have a call. Good evening. NewsMaker Live, you're on the air. Hello? Okay, we lost that call. Let's see if we get some more of your calls once again.
I was saying, for example, they accuse, that you have heard them say over and over they were not getting any assistance from our government in terms of social programs and all that kind of thing. And I must say I blame us for not clearing the air on all that. Like, for example, 2019, 2020.
Cool that point. Yeah. Good evening, NewsMaker Live, you're on the air. Hello, good evening to you. Hello, good evening to you, caller. Yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah, you would be surprised. Like, one of the programs of the SSDF is educational assistance. There's the HOPE program, there's the Kudmes HPC, there's the boys, the Boys to Men program, there's the HOPE program, and so on. But in the educational assistance program, you'll be surprised if I tell you that the constituency that got the most students assisted was Castries East.
Okay, we have a call. Good evening to you, NewsMaker Live, you're on the air. Hello? Mr. Producer, I hope we don't have a problem with our phones, because people are calling in and apparently they're not hearing us. Good evening, NewsMaker Live, you're on the air.
How are you doing, Tim? Good evening.
I'm okay, caller. Good evening to you. Go ahead, please.
And good evening to Mr. Montoute.
Hi, good evening, caller.
Tim and Mr. Montoute, the Prime Minister is trying to deflect on the substantive issue. And that issue is that SSDF checks have allegedly was in the hands of a government minister who misused the SSDF funds for his own personal...
Okay, caller, it's an allegation, caller. It's an allegation. Try not to put us in trouble. It is an allegation, sir. Yeah?
Right, I said allegedly. Yes, I'm guided by you, Tim, allegedly. So that is the substantive issue, not about audits. The Prime Minister thinks he's smart. He's trying to deflect and change the narrative. Mr. Prime Minister, I'm calling upon you, and I'm using, through you, Tim, your program, I'm asking you, Mr. Prime Minister, gain some political, testicular fortitude, have the courage, and do the honorable thing for the country, and relieve Richard Frederick of his ministerial portfolio. It is causing tremendous damage to the image of our country, donor agencies are looking at us in a bad light, such as the World Bank and the CDB and the Taiwanese government, because as you know, those donor agencies fund the SSDF. And with that scandal looming over, alleged scandal looming over the head of the SSDF, it doesn't augur well for good governance. So, Honorable Singh, muster the testicular fortitude, Mr. Prime Minister, and fire Richard Frederick. This is a scandal that is international, it's regional, it's local, and it's not looking good for our country. Have a blessed night, team.
All right, thank you so much for calling, sir. You have another call. Good evening, NewsMaker Live, you're on the air.
Team, comment allez-vous?
Oui, voilà. Bonsoir.
Bonsoir, et puis, monsieur Montoute.
Bonsoir, monsieur.
Team, tout cas, changer la tenue à boutique, Paramount. Now, c'est un bail moins stable et moins factuel qui bail ça là. Les moi venu pour acheter même place là pour SSDS à Kubawel qui monsieur Malcolm Charles qui mon qui place là te sali et si moi mati monsieur Montoute ça douce. Monsieur Charles teni Paramount les madame ni et place et toutes ces business là tout bail te aller à de manière bail pas bon. Les moi venu ba moi yon prix pour place ça là. Les moi venu pour acheter place ça là. Premier bagage monsieur Malcolm Charles dit, c'est monsieur Malcolm Charles qui a OBI et moi ça crier, et moi ça dit non moins pour ils savent comment moyen. Il dit moi il passe à 20 place ça là bas moi because c'est book SLP à Kabali plus large parce que ça moi de Kabali. C'est tout le monde veut dire pour Oswaya, n'a quitté l'Est pour l'autre passé. Si moi mati, c'est mon tout.
Dis-nous non.
Non, moi c'est Jean-George.
Jean-George?
Oui.
Ok.
Ok, moi qui t'ai acheté ça et avocat à tout ça là, pour que quelqu'un fait papier à moi, c'est Gordon et Gordon.
Ok, mais ça est business, hein? Ça c'est business. Mon qui est plus là.
Non, nous t'as fait papier, frère. Nous t'as fait papier. Nous t'as fait papier. Ça pas business. Si on a fait papier et pour venir pour faire bail CEO et puis bagage ça là, ou pas juste changer ça. Parce que si moi j'ai acheté caillou et puis moi j'ai un petit dépôt et puis moi j'ai un bagage pour lui, ou pas juste changer ça comme ça.
Ça n'a dit c'est ça c'est l'autre histoire parce que même building ça là juste là qu'a détruit pour le moment juste ça c'est là.
Non, c'est pas problème. Moi
gouvernement qui gaspille dans le pays.
OK, merci beaucoup.
Ouais, parce que place ça là, ça yo dit yo te vle place là pour yo mettre trafic là. Trafic yo te vle mettre là, pas SSDS. Bon, OK, n'a pas.
OK, merci beaucoup. You continue with your calls.
You know, saying that, you know, I mean, you hear them talk about we were not providing them with any assistance when they were in opposition and so on. And again, that is dishonest because, you know, for educational assistance, I had the most populous constituency then. I had 97 students assisted. Castries East had 114, you know. And, you know, it was evenly distributed. Now, by the way, it's not based on population, it's based on need.
Yeah.
So when the officers of the SSDS carried out their investigations and they looked at the cases, they felt there were more people there who needed cases. And it's not because it was an opposition constituency we didn't provide it.
We have a call. Good evening. NewsMaker Live on the air. Hello? Okay, we lost that call. I'm sure momentarily another call will be coming through. Once again for my guest, Mr. Lenard Spider Montoute. We have at least 6 minutes left on the broadcast as we continue our program right here on DBS television. Hello, good evening to you on the air.
Yes, Tim, good
evening to you, caller.
Hi, Tim, good night.
Hi, good night to you, caller.
Yes, I was just asking Mr. Montoute. Mr. Montoute, in your experience as Minister for the SSDF, was the case that government ministers would be handed checks or vouchers to themselves personally, that is SSDF vouchers and SSDF checks, to personally distribute to their constituencies as if they were social workers or SSDF workers. Because the Prime Minister on the market said something that I found very, very disconcerting. He said that these monies from the SSDF that are being distributed, and apparently by his ministers, is meant to give a soulagement, a little soulagement when the people come to the offices. Is it the normal case? And is it best practice that ministers of government are in the business of providing, having first of all direct access to state funds, whether by way of checks or vouchers, and that they themselves are the persons administering the distribution of those funds? And what do you see as the major downside of that type of practice? Thank you.
Okay,
thank you so much.
Color, that is highly inappropriate. That is not supposed to be. And the downside to it is that individuals, politicians, could use state resources to further and promote their political agenda and interests. Now, there are cases when you have the stimulus program where the representatives make recommendations, give names to the SSDF for people to carry out work. The people carry out the work, the officers go and inspect and so on. And to facilitate the ease of the check distribution, they may have the parliamentary office, the constituency office, to assist in that program. But to have parliamentary representatives, politicians with checks in their hands or vouchers of the SSDF distributing, that is highly inappropriate. You may make a recommendation because you are the representative, you know who is who, and send them to the SSDF, but it is for the officers of the SSDF to investigate to find out whether the people actually justly deserve the assistance and what extent to which they are going to be assisted. That is how it ought to be done, not just, blank checks to parliamentarians or parliamentarians having access to vouchers and so on to further their political agenda.
We have a final call. Good evening, NewsMaker Live, you're on the air. Hello, good evening to you, caller. Hello?
Hello?
Hello, good evening. Okay. All right, we lost that call.
I think I'm speculating now, and in the absence of information, speculation is justified. I'm saying that I think the Prime Minister and Minister responsible for SSDF is reluctant to carry out the investigation that is required, to carry out the independent audit that is being called for, that is needed right now. Perhaps he is afraid of what will be discovered. Okay? But if you are sure that the organization is being run as it should, you should have no hang-ups about carrying out the investigation, clearing the air on the matter, and restoring the good name of such an important government agency, and clearing the government itself of that disrepute that it has been ditched into by Minister Richard Frederick from these allegations.
Let's take the final comments from you, Mr. Montoute.
Well, I want to call on all St. Lucians. It is time that we begin to place a high premium on our democracy and good governance in this country. It will impact our quality of life and it will impact our future as a country. When the time comes, as responsible, good citizens who are conscientious and have the best interests of our country at heart, we must take a stand on matters. Here is an opportunity, here's a moment where that is required of us. It is important that we show who we are as people and that we be judged by history in time to come by the stance that we have taken on issues such as this. This is not a UWP matter. This is not even an SLP matter. This is a matter of good governance. This is a matter of the management of public funds. This is a matter of abuse of power. This is a matter of conduct of public officers. The Prime Minister has not fulfilled his responsibility by refusing to address the issue and to take a position to ensure that we are provided with the requisite information and answers to the questions that we are asking about the situation and the allegations that are being made. The board of directors have failed so far in their responsibility
to come out and to clear the air, because they are in a position to, they have responsibility and oversight for the SSDF. The director, the executive director, Mr. John Victorin, he too must be careful that he is not seen as someone who has facilitated misfeasance and engaged in it himself. And so what we are doing now is not any political witch hunt. We are looking at preservation of an institution that is of great importance as an agency that serves the poor and vulnerable in our country. We want to ensure that every cent that has been donated or raised by the SSDF or allocated to the SSDF finds its rightful route, that is in the hands of people who need it, the poor and the vulnerable. So when you take a stand today, you're taking a stand for country. Speak out, stand up, let it be known that what is taking place right now is unacceptable, and that if needs be, where the people who ought to act do not take action, we are prepared to take action. And I want to say to the government of St. Lucia, and the Prime Minister in particular, that if he fails to act, we the people of St. Lucia will act. And by the month's end, we expect to see action, and the action we expect to see, sir, is not Richard Frederick returning to his ministry. In a case like this, it is good governance and prudence to ask the individual who has been accused to step down, to demit office, to submit, tender his resignation, and not be in the way or be perceived to be in the way of the investigation that is taking place, that he is not in any position to influence, prejudice, or in any way interfere with the proceedings. The board of the SSDF may be subjects of the investigation as well. They should not be involved in any way either. Of course, the executive director, that includes him, and the Prime Minister. You should ensure that the public perception is that justice is served, because there is an impartial, independent commission that is set up to investigate, and auditors that are appointed by an independent commission. And so I say to St. Lucians in closing, if we do not confront what can destroy us, we may very well end up being destroyed by what confronts us. Tim, I want to thank you for the opportunity tonight. I want to thank all your viewers and listeners, and I want to end by calling on all St. Lucians, whether you are SLP or UWP, as long as you are a citizen of this country, to ensure that we put an end to those kind of practices, that whether it happened or not, what we do now will ensure that it does not happen in the future. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lenard Spider-Man Montoute, for being my guest on this evening's NewsMaker Live broadcast. To you, thank you as always for watching and listening, because if it's Wednesday, it's NewsMaker Live. Time now for the clip that peaked. Once again, thank you so much for watching. My name is Timothy Poleon, saying good night and see you next time.
I, Philip Joseph here, I would like to be judged as being the Prime Minister, not being judged as being part of a government.
Came into government that we had a manifesto and a vision and mission that had been approved by my party, by the highest body.
Basel 11 has not been in existence. 50 was...
Giant getting bazooka. You spraying big on to knock out mosquitoes?
I have never had a joint account with anybody in my life. Not my ex-wife, not my children, nobody. And I will refer that to the Privileges Committee.
What about the culture of people getting into office and not being effective?
What people become Prime Minister of St. Lucia have been the most ready.
Let's do it this Wednesday, because if it's Wednesday, it's NewsMaker Live.